Through this period of intense pain, I still had few people to talk to or confide in. Divorce for me was something very solitary. Gene was on his own journey with his own way of protecting himself, his own armor. Therapy continued to be a haven for me, a place where I could talk honestly and express my stupidest, craziest thoughts. One of the things that therapy always did for me was to allow me to see that I wasn't as nuts as I feared I was, that my reactions were normal, or rather, that there was no such thing as normal, despite appearances to the contrary. Perhaps the person who helped me most of all was Michael James Jackson, the producer we had used for Creatures, Lick It Up, and Animalize. He's very intellectual and well-read and seems to see life in a more multi-level, complex way than most people. He knew I had been an art student and had noticed me sketching all the time during downtime in the studio. One day he said to me, "You need to paint." I was taken aback. "You need to get some of this out and explore some of it by painting," he continued. The idea resonated with me. Soon, Michael gave me some art books to try to inspire me, including a coffee table book on Mark Rothko. Finally, I went out and bought some supplies: canvases, brushes, a palette knife. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I was determined to give it a try. The first time I set things up and started to paint, it was like an out-of-body experience. I watched my hand move without thinking, and when it was done, I had a self-portrait. I felt a sense of relief and satisfaction, so I started another one and another. I suddenly had a need to paint. Painting was like stream of consciousness with color, a purging. It allowed me to explore emotions without words. And then, in a sense, I could step back and look in the mirror to see what was going on in my life or how I was feeling. It was almost like an exorcism. I would exhale and sigh when I finished a canvas. I had a sense of having gotten something out of me. Eventually, I realized I hadn't heard that guttural sound in a few days, and then I hadn't heard it in a few weeks. I licked my wounds and moved forward. I started cooking a lot, too. It was important to me that Evan see that he and I could be self-sufficient. Not to mention that I wanted to feed him healthy meals and give him the calm and stability of eating together. I learned to make chicken parmesan and pancakes. I learned to prepare different types of fish and vegetables. I mastered the waffle iron and the muffin tin. My meatballs became things of beauty. One of my favorite things to prepare was a Brussels sprouts dish I invented myself. Even people who didn't like Brussels sprouts, like Evan when he was a child, loved that dish. I cut the sprouts in half and pan-fried them with balsamic vinegar, dried cherries, and prosciutto, then finished them with Parmesan cheese and lemon zest. I found great pleasure in cooking and serving food, in giving. Evan liked to help with the cooking. It was just the two of us in the house most of the time, but cooking together helped make the place feel like a home, a family home. Once when my dad was at the house and Evan and I were cooking and playing, he said, "Don't you give him too much love?" "You can never give a child too much love," I said. "You can only give them too little love. Love doesn't make a child weaker. It makes a child stronger." That was an odd one for my dad to hear. If I ever heard someone telling Evan not to cry, not to be a baby, anything like that, I made a point of telling Evan the truth that I had discovered. People who hide their emotions are weak. You find strength and peace by being open. Chapter 59. After my divorce, I might as well have worn a hat that said, "No drama" on it. That became a mantra. I didn't want actresses and models. I didn't want anyone whose sense of self or mood was subject to whether or not she got a part or did well at an audition. I now knew that the drama I had earlier mistaken for fun, exciting, and normal, a basic component of a relationship, was actually tumultuous, counterproductive, and unnecessary. Emotions? Yes. Drama? No. I wasn't going to waste time. I wasn't going to compromise myself or portray myself as something I wasn't. I wasn't going to second-guess people and try to be what I thought they wanted. No drama. I knew now that I should expect someone to love me for who I was. One night in late 2001, I met Michael James Jackson for dinner at Ago Restaurant on Melrose. A group of women sitting at the next table included Tracy Tweed, who was the sister of Gene's longtime girlfriend Shannon, and whom I had dated. We said hello, and I went back to my conversation with Michael. Then another friend of theirs came bounding into the restaurant and over to Tracy's table. I was absolutely captivated by her. I decided I had to talk to that woman. I was compelled as if by an unseen force. If there was ever going to be a moment that proved to me the existence of God, and I do believe there is a God, then this was it. Sure, some people might choose to call it luck. To me, luck is taking advantage of a situation God puts in front of us. The woman's name was Erin. She was as tall as me and had a great laugh, and she was a practicing attorney. I called her the next day and asked whether we could have dinner. Either we could go out or I would cook for her on a night when Evan was with his mother. If you like seafood, I could make a swordfish with Dijon mustard and capers, maybe serve it with some pasta and, I don't know, maybe broccoli with garlic and lemon and olive oil? She agreed. Apparently, her friends had already given her the green light. They told her it was safe to hang out with me. She went for the swordfish and came over to my house where we drank wine and ate and talked for 6 hours straight. My newfound love of cooking was paying off. From the moment Erin and I met, we were totally honest with each other. She knew what I was going through, and I was very clear about my parameters for a relationship. I let her see everything about me, but she was understanding and nurturing, and she wasn't threatened by who I was or what I'd done. She was extremely bright and was confident in who she was. If anything bothered her, she told me about it. There was zero drama. We didn't rush into a monogamous relationship, but on all levels, there was definitely a great attraction there. Meanwhile, there was a little burst of activity on the kiss front. In February 2002, we were scheduled to play Rock and Roll All Night for the closing ceremony of the Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City. The Sunday broadcast was supposed to attract something like 1 billion viewers, so even though it was a lip-sync job, we wanted to rehearse it beforehand on Friday and Saturday. Gene, Eric, and I all arrived as planned on Friday, rehearsed that day, and rehearsed twice again on Saturday. Ace was still a no-show on Saturday, so we had to call Tommy, who was on vacation with his family in Hawaii. Poor Tommy had to fly in and stand by to fill in, since there was no way to know whether Ace would turn up in time. In the end, Ace did appear at the last minute on Sunday and perform the song with us. He was severely testing my low tolerance for drama. We'd also been asked to do a private gig in Jamaica about 2 weeks after the Olympics debacle. A Russian oligarch offered us $1 million to play for about 300 people at his 30th birthday party. Ace wouldn't do it. He was so paranoid by that stage that he thought the whole thing was a dastardly plot to get him out of the country so Gene, Doc, and I could have him assassinated. That way we could replace him and not have a problem. Replacing him was easier than all that. If Ace didn't want to go, Tommy could do it. End of story. Again, this was no mystery. Tommy had his own costume already, which was no secret to Ace. Tommy knew every song the band had ever recorded. I had no doubts about Tommy. We wouldn't have had him suit up all those times if we weren't confident in him. Without demeaning the role of actually being in the band, Tommy just shifted from one position to another. He was already part of the family, and now he took a step to the right, from being next to the band to being in the band. He was more equipped for the task than Ace ever was. The gig itself was strange. Everyone who wasn't a guest had a gun. Eric and Tommy opened the door to spontaneity. With them, we could play a song we hadn't played in 10 years. They both had the knowledge and ability to spit out a song from any era of the band. After those gigs on the heels of the farewell tour, I truly bought into the idea that this was the end of the band. It was a shame because even though it was a spur-of-the-moment thing, with Eric and Tommy, the band was firing on all cylinders. In a lot of ways, it was the band I had envisioned when we started the reunion, an idealized version of the band with the iconic characters and the chops to match. Damn. I had no idea what I was going to do next. I thought about making music on my own. I thought about doing more theater. Losing Kiss was like losing a family member. It had been such a big part of my life, I felt a huge void. One afternoon later in 2002, I took my car to the car wash and one of the workers said to me, Paul, the farewell tour was great. When are you doing the 30th anniversary tour? What? That would be okay? You mean you still want us? The guy at the car wash really opened my eyes. He still loved the band. He wanted to know what was next. I'm the one closing the door. I'm the one throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But why? All of a sudden, I wondered what we were really saying farewell to. Maybe the farewell tour was better envisioned as a farewell to those two guys. A farewell to compromising ourselves musically. A farewell to drama. The idea of throwing it all away because of a pair of jerks who never valued the band suddenly seemed crazy. We had existed without them before. Now, because those two had come back into the fold, I was going to let them have their way by causing the demise of Kiss? Why stop now? We had built the band back and people had embraced it. Hell, put on a good show and Kiss could go on for another 200 years. And without the weak links, this band could put on a great show. I didn't want to give up something I'd spent 30 years busting my ass for. I'm not done. Part 6. Forever. Chapter 60. How much could we alter the equation in Kiss? That was the question the Aerosmith camp raised when the idea of a co-headlining tour was floated. Doc was sure he knew. Gene and I were sure too. Under other circumstances, both Ace and Peter would have been out for the 2003 tour, but for whatever reason, the Aerosmith camp wanted at least 3 original members involved. By this point, Ace had already made it clear he was done, which left Peter as the 3rd member. Ugh. There were contracts to be signed by Peter, Gene, Tommy, and me. Of course, the 4 of us discussed it, and the members of the band were spelled out. After the Jamaica gig, it was a given that Tommy would wind up in the band. It was a logical progression, so much so that we never even spoke about it. After Jamaica, we knew we didn't need to audition for a new guitar player. Tommy was the answer. Tommy had been a great tour manager, not because he was destined to be a great tour manager, but because he gave himself totally to anything he did. And when he officially joined the band as the new lead guitarist, it wasn't that we took our tour manager and dressed him up in a spaceman outfit. Tommy wasn't a doppelganger or a substitute. He was the next step and had proved that he deserved to be in the band and that he enhanced it musically. As we started out on our co-headlining tour with Aerosmith, however, I have to say that Tommy and Peter didn't feel like the secret formula to me. It still felt transitional. It felt like the wound was only partly healed. Certainly we had somebody who wanted to be there, who knew the songs, who could play them consistently night after night. And I didn't wake up every morning wondering how the day would go and how the show would go. 50% of the uncertainty and chaos had been eliminated. Peter, on the other hand, was up to his same old tricks. He had Gigi pouring a little more poison down the well each day. He complained incessantly about being disrespected by hotel staff. He bitched about the smoke from the pyrotechnics. The hotel guidebook was back too, along with complaints that his room was too dark or it was too far down the hall, the shows were too long, his hands hurt, on and on. But the response from audiences was encouraging. There were cheers for Tommy, everybody on their feet, just as it had always been. If it sounded like Kiss, looked like Kiss, and commanded like Kiss, it was Kiss. Meanwhile, Peter had his attorney trying to negotiate a contract extension during the tour. His demands, as usual, were absurd. I think they figured we would cave because Ace wasn't around anymore. Who knows what they were thinking? I knew by then that Kiss was bigger than any of the individuals. And I do not mean except me. I have a high regard for what I do, but I don't fool myself by thinking I'm the only one who can do it. Strangely, the longer the negotiating went on, the more Peter and his attorney seemed to think they had us over a barrel. We went along with it. When the tour was over and Peter's contract expired, I told him we had decided not to renew his contract. You're not happy. You say the shows are too long. Your hands hurt. You want to play other kinds of music. We want to continue. I think it's best for everyone if we just call it quits, Peter. It's time for us all to move on. I didn't have much to say beyond that. It wasn't that we were just going to become a different Kiss or a new Kiss. We were going to become a better Kiss. I couldn't change Peter any more than I could have changed Ace or Bill Aucoin or Donna or Pam. What I could do, however, was stop battling someone whose agenda was resolutely negative, someone who seemed intent on sabotaging everyone and everything around him, and then blaming anyone but himself. Fuck that. The idea that we would stop using any of the 4 iconic images was as ridiculous as the idea that we would stop playing any of the songs. Interestingly, years before, when we decided to try to buy the rights to the Catman and Spaceman images, Peter and Ace dealt their characters away as if they had no value. To them, they were mere bargaining chips. The fact that they so readily relinquished them showed me how little they cared about them. I was glad that those guys couldn't start turning up at Halloween conventions signing autographs in tattered Kiss outfits and makeup. I valued the images and wanted to protect them. Eric Singer had been phenomenal when he filled in on the farewell tour, and again it was a case of not needing to look any further. We had our man for the future. It was such a relief. Touring was a part of my life that Erin knew nothing about. Back on the road, I missed her and wanted her to be with me and experience it firsthand. It seemed so strange to see her walk into this until then unknown realm of my life. She was a joy. When Erin came to her first Kiss show, I remember seeing her in the audience dancing. She wasn't showing off, she was reflecting the elation I felt on stage. During a break from that tour, I took Erin to a charity dinner as my guest. When the host of the dinner mentioned me by name, Erin was the first person standing and clapping. I had never experienced anything like that. She was so secure in herself that she could happily give like that without feeling she was compromising who she was. The first trip we took together was to Las Vegas. We went to my favorite restaurant at the Bellagio called Picasso, that she loved the whole fine dining experience and meeting the executive chef there, Julian Serrano, who had become a friend of mine. As we were lying in bed later that night watching TV, I said I was thirsty. Erin said, "Oh, I'll get you a drink." I thought it was just an empty gesture and said, "No, don't be silly." But she got up and looked for the minibar. There wasn't one. "I'll go down to the lobby and get you something," she said, pulling on some sweats. "You're going to go down to the lobby and get me a drink?" I don't mean to sound like a kicked dog, but nobody had ever done something like that for me before. Erin would never do something that took away her pride, but she wasn't tangled up in bullshit. Being kind and giving wasn't a negative to her and didn't chip away at her sense of self. From time to time, we talked about the state of our relationship, where she was, where I was, how my home situation was unfolding. We always remained on the same page. A healthy relationship makes you healthier. I guess I realized only in retrospect that a dysfunctional relationship is a pretty good indicator of where you, yourself, are. Only someone in turmoil stays in a tumultuous relationship. Erin wasn't like that at all. I had really never met anyone like her. For the first year she and I dated, I never took her home when Evan was there. He had gone through a calamitous event in his life, and he needed to know he was safe rather than seeing me bring women around. Evan was in a situation he hadn't asked for, and the idea of getting on with my life without paying attention to his needs seemed transparently self-serving. I wanted Evan to know that our home was for the two of us. It was our world. One way I tried to declare this was to have a massive floor-to-ceiling fresco of the two of us put into my bedroom. The house was not a home when Pam and I divorced, so I decided to make this fresco the centerpiece, both as a way to lay claim to the space and to illustrate the world I wanted to create for Evan. It was based on a 19th century oil painting, a hunting party, Greek gods, nude maidens, cherubs, the works. Only I had the artist place me and Evan front and center, wearing togas with laurel wreaths around our heads. In the landscape around us were horses and dogs and dozens of bare-chested nubile maidens. An extreme example of poor bachelor pad taste? No way, no. For some reason, I thought this massive fresco was absolutely spectacular and something to display with pride. Erin, it would turn out, did not share this opinion. After Erin and I had been seeing each other for more than a year, I thought it was time to introduce her to Evan. But again, I didn't want him to feel threatened, so I decided to have them meet in a neutral location. I told Evan I had a friend who, like him, loved candy. I said we were going to visit a candy store at a shopping center and she was going to meet us there. She came and met Evan, but I never held her hand or kissed her. Only slowly over the course of many months, as Evan learned to get used to her and like her, did we start to reveal our affection a little more. As he became closer to Erin, I allowed him to see me and her becoming closer as well. It was a parallel course. I hope that in his eyes our relationship was evolving in front of him. Pam and I never badmouthed each other to Evan, and for that I'm so grateful to her. Neither of us wanted him to become a pawn in any disputes between us. I see things very simply. If you want to take it to logical extremes, it all boils down to one basic question. Do you hate your ex more than you love your child? As long as you love your child more, there's no basis for bad words or denying access or anything like that, which also meant Erin never represented a replacement or a threat. Further on down the road, Erin, Evan, and I took a trip together. I wanted him to see that Erin slept over sometimes, but again, I wanted it to happen in a neutral setting. We checked into a resort in Santa Barbara, and when we went into the room, Evan asked, "Where's Erin going to sleep?" "With me," I said. "Oh," he said without any surprise or discomfort, and we moved on. By that time in my life, I firmly believed we heal ourselves by helping others. My making Evan the center of things for me benefited everyone. It was such a joy to see a happy child. When Erin and I finally moved in together, she told me she wasn't crazy about the fresco in the bedroom. "We don't have to lose it," I said. "I mean, we can add you into it. You can be one of the maidens. You live here now. You can be on there too." "I hate it," she finally admitted. "I've always hated it." I was shocked. Then suddenly I found myself chuckling. When I stepped back, it did look like something from This Is Spinal Tap. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked. Then I went to the storage room and grabbed some paint and a couple of paint rollers, and we painted over the thing together. Chapter 61. Sometime after Erin moved in, Evan, who was about 10 at the time, accidentally locked himself out on the balcony off his bedroom. Erin and I were downstairs and didn't realize it. At one point I heard a noise, but couldn't place it. Wait, was that somebody shouting? Suddenly it dawned on me that Evan might be locked out. Erin and I ran upstairs. Evan was beside himself out on the balcony. We opened the door and he came running in, right past me and into Erin's arms. Some parents might have felt insulted by that, but I thought it was the greatest thing that he felt that way about her. It assured me that their relationship was strong and loving too. While on vacation with Erin in Hawaii in 2003, a gallery owner approached me and asked about doing something for his gallery, something like signed guitars. "I paint," I told him. He asked to see some of my paintings. After I showed him photos, he wanted to mount a show. Me? An art show? It sounded odd. Now granted, this wasn't some swank New York gallery, but still. We organized the show and I went back to Hawaii for the opening. We sold $35,000 worth of paintings, which certainly exceeded all my expectations since I had never expected to sell anything. It was quickly clear to me that if credibility came from being a starving artist, I would have to cross that off my list. After that, I had the bug. I wanted to do the same thing on the mainland. Soon enough, I had a deal in place with a chain of galleries around the country. We did a series of shows, and I felt as if I was exposing some people to a potentially enriching experience of culture, the visual arts, who might not otherwise get exposed to it. The same thing had been true when I did Phantom of the Opera, where I'm sure some Kiss fans made their first foray into musical theater. I felt I was breaking down some of the snobbery that I think ultimately does a disservice to the arts. People sometimes would come up to me at a show and tell me, "I don't know anything about art, but I like this piece." "What do you need to know?" I would say. "Something either moves you or it doesn't." I found it gratifying when people said a piece made them think of something from their own lives or sparked them to tell me a story about their own families. Seeing people affected by my paintings validated my work in a way I probably never would have experienced otherwise. Bill O'Coin came to one of my art shows. He had leveled out, and it was great to see him again. Bill was warm and supportive. As the friendship was rekindled and Kiss began to tour again with Eric and Tommy, Bill came to a few concerts as well as more art shows. Over time, we did a good deal of talking about the past. He told me how he had seen me as defensive and unhappy in the early days, unfulfilled, guarded. He loved the transformation he saw in me, what he called growth. He loved Erin, and he made a big point of how happy it made him to see that I had evolved to a better place. I was touched. Eventually, I would take a break from showing my art, even though my sales had by then passed the $2 million mark. I had started painting as a way to let off pressure. It was something I did without a schedule, without anyone asking questions. Painting was a big commitment since I had no training. It took a lot of time and effort and thought. There was no need for me to turn it into a business. I didn't want it to become a chore, especially as the band began to tour regularly again. One day back in LA, Erin and I were chatting about the state of our relationship. We started talking about her mother, who had spent decades working as an elementary school teacher. "So what does your mom think is going to happen between us?" I asked. "What does she think of this whole thing?" "Oh," Erin said, "my mom thinks either it will move forward at some point or it will fall apart." It hit me at that moment. This isn't going to fall apart. I couldn't imagine not being with Erin. I knew then and there that I wanted to be with her forever. We'd been together several years at that point. It wasn't a passing infatuation. Our relationship wasn't about love at first sight. The depth of my feelings for her grew out of our experiences together. It built over time. I called a jeweler in New York City and asked them to send me one of their booklets. Next, I picked out a stone. When the ring was finished, I carried it around waiting for the right moment to ask Erin to marry me. But I couldn't find that moment. We took another trip to Vegas in 2005 and returned to Picasso for a great meal. We both loved the place and were enjoying ourselves and drinking the wine pairings. I got pretty buzzed, in fact. I had figured this would be the place to pop the question, but I wanted to propose to her with a clear head. The next day, I kicked myself. Fuck, when am I going to do this? A friend of mine had lent me his private jet to fly home on, which is something I never imagined I'd say in my life. I thought perhaps that would be the perfect place. The sunlight at 40,000 feet would make the ring really shine. But when we got on the plane, all my neurotic tendencies came into play. Damn it, these windows are polarized. I won't get a sparkle on the ring. We landed back in LA and drove home. I have to do this. We got home. Off our bedroom is a balcony overlooking the pool and guest house. More things I never envisioned in my life. It was a beautiful sunny day. "Come on out here," I called to Erin from the balcony. "We should go for a swim." She walked out onto the balcony. We had literally just walked into the house, but I couldn't wait any longer. She was leaning over the railing, looking down over the pool, and I stood behind her, wrapped my arms around her, and held the ring before her eyes. Her reaction was a cross between panic and crying as she blurted out, "Oh my God!" She didn't seem to know what to do. "Will you marry me?" I asked. "Yes," she said. Then we called her mom to tell her the news, that we were moving forward, not falling apart. We planned the wedding in a single afternoon. Everyone said they'd never seen anything go so quickly, but I thought, hey, if we want peach-colored flowers, what does it matter what kind they are? People tend to get hung up on minutia when it's really about celebration. Oh, we need to have these certain flowers from Africa. Screw that. I did spend time picking every song the band would play, however, and since I wanted to go deep into the Motown catalog, we got a horn section, multiple singers, and percussionists. It was an incredible sound, gloriously loud and unrelenting. The outdoor wedding took place at the Ritz-Carlton in Pasadena in November 2005 with a relatively small group of friends and family. As thin and beautiful as Erin is, she loves candy. So we arranged to have a candy bar there, every kind of candy, stuff I'd never seen, stuff that looked to me like a science project. She was in heaven, and so was I. We danced and danced and danced. Chapter 62. Tommy and Eric came to the wedding, but Gene wasn't invited. I told him well in advance. I didn't want to go through the motions of inviting him just because he was my musical partner. He didn't belong there. He was well known for his views on marriage, calling it an institution that he didn't want to live in. Your views on marriage are your own, I told him. But when you insult and demean people who get married and ridicule or dismiss the idea of marriage, you have no place at a wedding. How somebody votes in a presidential election is one thing, but why ridicule people or the validity of their beliefs? It would have been insulting to have such a vocal opponent of marriage, somebody who went out of his way to say things I found offensive about the rationality and importance of marriage at my wedding. He got it. But his opinions on marriage also began to shift. By the next year, when Tommy got married in 2006, Gene was very supportive, and Gene eventually married Shannon Tweed, his girlfriend of more than 25 years, in 2011. 2 months after Erin and I were married, we found out she was pregnant. We were ecstatic. Having children was always our plan, and we weren't waiting to get started. I was 53 and Erin was 33. During the pregnancy, reading books, going for sonograms, and searching for possible names only bonded us more. Erin looked incredible pregnant and loved every minute of it, which made the time all that much more joyous. Evan, too, was thrilled with the news, which put to rest any fears of mine that he might be angry or resentful. His only demand was that he be the first one to join us in the delivery room to greet his new sibling. Once we found out we were having a boy, we went through hundreds of names and combinations before deciding on Colin Michael. Funny how after he was born, all of the other possibilities we had considered seemed so wrong. Colin's birth was a completely different experience from Evan's. Erin started having contractions in the middle of the night, and I was there with a notepad timing the contractions and writing everything down. Eventually, we drove to the hospital. Again, I set up my tripod and video camera. I told the doctor who was going to deliver the baby that I wasn't squeamish and wanted to be involved in the delivery as much as possible. When Erin was in the final minutes of labor, the doctor turned to me and said, "Get your gloves on." After a brief moment of panic, I pulled on some gloves, and as this little miracle began to emerge, I was told to pull him out. It was surreal as I lifted this little life out of the only world he had ever known and brought him into ours. Colin's birth was another moment of deep connection with God and all the generations before me. He, too, would be my legacy and my connection to both past generations and future ones. I had sometimes worried during Erin's pregnancy how I could love another child with the same depth and effortless commitment to giving my all with which I loved Evan. That fear evaporated as I held Colin and realized that we have an unlimited capacity to create and give love. I would dedicate myself yet again to another amazing little boy, and together we would find out all that we could learn from each other. Outside my growing family, Gene and I still fought on occasion. His use of the KISS logo and makeup and his self-promotion in the press escalated throughout the late 90s and beyond. I saw the term marketing genius used in reference to Gene quite frequently in the wake of subsequent tours. It turned my stomach. Contrary to the notion that Gene spearheaded or maximized our merchandise empire, the truth is that over the years, the vast majority of licensees have sought us out, and all solicitations go through our product development team. Neither Gene nor I has had an active hand in any significant deals. He was no marketing genius. He just took credit for things. It was unwarranted, selfish, and hurtful, and there was no way to excuse it. Calculated strategist? Sure. Genius? No. After the farewell tour, I saw sketches of a concept for a cartoon series Gene had sold. The cartoon character was basically Gene in KISS makeup. It was about a guy in a band. "Hey man, that's a KISS entity," I said. "Oh no, this is not a KISS image," he said. "It's totally different." That kind of stuff still riled me up. There he was sitting across the table from me, lying about something that clearly fell under our partnership agreement, and he knew it. "Do you think you're talking to one of the other idiots you're in business with?" I asked him. "Are you kidding me?" That got settled real quickly. Fairness prevailed, but not by Gene's volition. Beyond the anger I felt each time he showed such blatant disregard for our partnership, my feelings were also hurt that the guy with whom I had built all of this would treat me, when it served his purposes, with the same indifference I often saw him exhibit in his dealings with people I knew he didn't care about. Still, despite the hiccups, Gene and I have never gotten along better than during the past decade. We have very few points of contention these days. We've been friends for more than 40 years and have built great lives for ourselves. I think that over time I came to recognize the fundamental difference in our personalities. I wanted to improve myself and remedy the issues that plagued me. But he chose to ignore his underlying issues and instead committed himself to creating an external facade and persona that unfortunately he felt required him to knock down anyone who threatened his singularity in the spotlight. Earlier, I could never understand why he didn't want to resolve issues he had. I could never understand why someone so intelligent wouldn't do something to make life easier for himself, and probably for me and other people around him. After all, I know the never-ending effort it takes to keep up a persona and maintain a front to shield yourself. Somewhere along the line, I came to understand that his attitude was, why bother? Once I reconciled myself to how different we were in that regard, our relationship became easier. Gene and I are very different, and that chemistry and contrast continues to be keys to our success. These days, we laugh at each other's quirks. Another thing that has changed is what I expect from Gene. I expect less. I'm more realistic. I'm very clear about what's acceptable to me and what isn't. I found the secret to a great partnership was knowing its limitations. If you don't ask of a relationship what it can't give you, you won't be disappointed. 40 years on, in an immensely fruitful and successful partnership, I express my thoughts regarding Gene with acceptance as opposed to animosity. He continues to have his meetings sitting behind a big desk in an office surrounded by wall-to-wall cases filled with Kiss merchandise, never clarifying the fact that rather than being the creative force behind it all, he is in reality just one of the 4 faces on each box. This stuff still goes on, but I'm okay with it. I still want credit for what I do and achieve, but in the wake of all the positive changes in my personal life, I have stopped caring as much. I now consider my life to be so rich that many of the other concerns that once were so important seem like a waste of precious time. What I have gained inwardly and outwardly from a happy marriage and family far outweigh what I might have been looking for as far as perceptions about the inner workings of Kiss. Those perceptions were and are far more important and perhaps fulfilling to Gene. Life has to be about what you get in exchange for what you give up, and the things I now hold dear aren't worth giving up for fleeting publicity hits. If you define yourself by deals and media coverage, you're always searching for the next fix. That's life on a hamster wheel. If you can't stop running, you aren't really free. You remain a slave if you don't figure out something internal to make you happy. The same is true as far as touring is concerned. We don't have to tour all the time. We are our own bosses. Kiss is my work, and it's spectacular and rewarding work in so many ways, but there is room for a life outside the band. Every week I spend on the road is a week I don't spend with the people who matter most in the world to me. Those 7 days are more precious to me now than ever before. After I married Erin, I began to put parameters on what I was willing to do and who I was willing to spend time with. There would be no compromises. Life was too short for that. Kiss isn't life. It's a facet of life. At times when Doc came to us with proposals for things, I began to say, I'd rather be home. Gene was always puzzled by this. You're going to say no to money? He would ask in utter disbelief. Yeah, I said. The question is, what's more money going to get me, and what will I have to give up to get it? For him, it was simple. As Doc jokes, when Gene is 95 years old, he'll be standing at the end of his driveway with his walker, flicking his tongue at passing cars. We all deserve to find happiness, and I hope Jean does, now and in the future. But to me, there's more to life. The money I lose by not doing a show won't change my world, but being away from my family will. I weigh one against the other. How much do I need? Sure, I'd always like to have more. Who wouldn't? But I don't need more if the sacrifice is too great. Not just to my wife and kids, but to me. Sometimes what I would miss out on isn't worth the money. My children turned out to be the ultimate resolution to issues that plagued me my entire life. You can't change your past, but you can change your life and the lives of those around you. I've come to terms with things about myself that I had to wrestle with, and as a result, I have more to give, because I know myself more. Having children allowed me a second chance at the childhood I never had. It's cathartic to raise my kids in a loving and nurturing way that I myself never knew. I've been able to give my kids the life I didn't have by treating them the way I wished I had been treated, by helping them feel the way I wished I had felt. Maybe not everyone is affected in the same way by what a family and a deep relationship can offer. As the things I missed most in life until very late, they mean the world to me. Truly sharing with somebody, baring your soul to someone, having someone know your vulnerabilities and weaknesses and fears, and doing the same for that person, offers a calm and a sense of refuge that no hotel, no matter how luxurious, can rival. Chapter 63. All my feelings of love and pride for KISS were amplified by starting to tour with Tommy and Eric as permanent members. I quickly realized that I would rather not perform any more than have to deal with people I didn't want to be around. I could never go back to the drama, the lowered standards, the disrespect for the craft. It would be whoring myself. It was amazing to have people in the band whose mentality was, what can I do to make the band bigger? Instead of, what can I do to make myself bigger? But if you make the latter your priority, it doesn't work. With Ace and Peter, that's the way it was. With Tommy and Eric, there was a work ethic. And it started with taking pride in what they did individually and what we did as a team. Of course, a certain segment of the audience didn't want the reunion era to be finished. People occasionally dismissed Eric and Tommy as imposters, but when I stood on stage with them, I had the opposite impression. If anyone had been imposters, it was Peter and Ace during the reunion tours. Whatever ability those guys may once have had was long gone, or rather, long discarded. They were a distortion of anything they had ever been. With apologies to anyone who doesn't want to hear it, Ace and Peter simply couldn't play their instruments by the end, and they didn't care, which in my mind was perhaps an even bigger sin. If people want to talk about seeing the band as a meal ticket, they can't point at me or Jean. We were already eating well. Only Peter and Ace treated KISS as a meal ticket, and even then they couldn't recognize their good fortune sufficiently enough to punch it. The new lineup of the band was much more the band as I envisioned it, and the way people heard it in their minds. I always wanted the audience to feel that we surpassed their expectations, and it had been a long time since we had been able to do that. With Tommy and Eric, we did it. The band could sing so well, in fact, that people constantly asked whether we used pre-recorded background vocals. Nope. We just finally had 4 strong band members. Through all of this, KISS wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. Once I rekindled my friendship with Bill Aucoin, he continued to come to occasional concerts. I loved the fact that we had both come to terms with personal demons. I loved where we both had ended up, both in stable relationships and peaceful mental states. In a way, I found with Bill what I wasn't able to find in the band reunion. We were able to bring things full circle, put things to rest, and look back and enjoy what we had created together. Then over lunch in Florida one afternoon, he told me he had advanced stage prostate cancer. I asked what I could do to be helpful, and Bill told me he worried about his partner, Roman, and what would happen to him if Bill lost his battle. I talked to Jean, and we decided to buy the condo they were living in and give it to Roman. At the end of a European tour in 2008, I rented a beautiful villa in Tuscany. The place looked like a 3-story museum in the middle of the countryside. I made arrangements for Erin, Evan, and Colin to join me there, along with my parents, Erin's mom, her mom's husband, and my good friend and security man, Danny Francis. Erin and I had been holding off on telling everyone some big news until we were all around the kitchen table eating a home-cooked dinner. We started our meal with a couple of bottles of Lambrusco, a bubbly red wine with no pretenses of chic or airs of high society. Then we told them. Erin and I were expecting a baby girl. Funny thing about choosing names, we just weren't cool enough to name our children Pineapple or Astro Girl. We loved old school names and chose Sarah Brianna for our first girl. Colin's delivery had been an easy 25 minutes of pushing for Erin, and we assumed Sarah's would be similar. No such luck. Sarah wasn't in the proper position in the birth canal, and ultimately a C-section was needed. Watching it performed was shocking and certainly bore no resemblance to natural delivery, but at the end of it, there was Sarah, who was absolutely gorgeous. Everyone commented on her angelic face and perfect upturned nose. There were some post-surgery complications that led to days of unspeakable pain and very real danger for Erin, including the risk of losing a kidney, and so I called some big guns I thankfully knew. A group of specialists descended on Erin's room like a SWAT team, and a series of quick tests found the root of the problem. Erin endured weeks of risky surgery to reattach things and reroute the problems. But thanks to a stellar team that included Dr. Stephen Sachs and Dr. Ed Phillips at Cedars-Sinai Hospital, Erin made a slow but full recovery. Once she and Sarah were finally home, I got to experience a bond I had always heard was so unique, the bond between a father and daughter. Sarah melted my heart and awakened a spot in it that she alone owned. In 2009, KISS went back to South America and found ourselves treated like visiting dignitaries. When we arrived in Sao Paulo, one of the world's most populous cities, it was rush hour and the freeways were gridlocked. Suddenly, about 36 motorcycle cops shot ahead of our vans and cleared the entire highway between the airport and our hotel. The overpasses, on-ramps, exits, everything was blocked by the police so we four idiots could get to our hotel. It was unbelievable. Certainly the motorcade of the President of the United States of America wouldn't have gotten better traffic control. At the end of the ride, we took photos with the cops. They were fans. Despite the fact that the new KISS lineup proved an immediate success and also had long-term durability, it wasn't clear we needed to go back into the studio. We certainly didn't need to do it for the money. And besides, the experience of Psycho Circus had left a sour taste in my mouth and totally turned me off to the idea of recording. I couldn't have articulated what exactly it would take to change my mind, but over time I began to figure out a set of prerequisites that might make it possible for me to make another KISS album. For one thing, I needed to have final say. I wasn't going to work on something I couldn't be proud of. I was through second-guessing things or being second-guessed. At least if we did something I loved, there would be one big fan regardless of what else happened. For another, I wasn't going to work on an album unless everyone put in the same amount of effort. There wasn't going to be any sense of entitlement or special treatment. Everyone would have to earn their place, and I wouldn't put up with any mediocre songs just because of a sense of job tenure. And finally, I wanted to produce any new record. The idea of needing an intermediary between me and Gene or anyone else was ridiculous. I was too old for that nonsense. If there was going to be another KISS album, it was going to be done properly without politics or ulterior motives. It was going to be great material and great playing, all brought together with a vision. I did believe that this team, Gene, Tommy, Eric, and me, could put together a really great KISS record. With the changes in the industry, we also had the chance to have total control from the songs and recording process to the marketing and distribution. And I thought it would be a shame to let Psycho Circus be our final statement. I knew that times had changed, so I had no expectations of sales at past levels. Success in my eyes would be measured in quality and realizing my own standards and expectations. The current band is so impressive and cohesive. We owe it to ourselves to step up to the plate. So in 2009, it was time to make a new KISS album. Everyone got together to start writing songs. Another stipulation was that we do it all together as a team with no outside writers. When we finished Sonic Boom, we did a deal directly with Walmart to have not just our new album on sale there, but a store within a store with all sorts of merchandise and back catalog items alongside Sonic Boom. And when it was released, we debuted at number 2 on the charts. Bill O'Coin flew in for our show at Madison Square Garden in October 2009, just after the release of Sonic Boom. He said he was going to beat the cancer, but he was clearly very sick. He planned to come to our show at Wembley Arena in London in May 2010, but he had to cancel. A few weeks later, Roman told me that Bill's condition had taken a turn for the worse and he was in the hospital. I called Bill while we finished our European tour, and Gene and I made plans to fly to Miami to see him as soon as the tour was over. When I checked back with Roman soon after, he said Bill was unconscious. He had developed sepsis. Roman put the phone to Bill's ear for me, and I thanked him for everything he had done for KISS. Regardless of what had happened later, none of the good things that happened in the formative years would have happened without him, I told him. I love you, Bill, I said. The last concert of the Sonic Boom tour was in Belgium in June, and Gene and I stayed up all night after the show to catch the first flight to the States in the morning. We phoned Roman to let him know we'd be at Bill's bedside by that afternoon. When our flight landed and I turned on my phone, I saw there was a missed call from Roman. I checked my voicemail. Bill had passed away while Gene and I were on the way to say goodbye to him. Goodbye. Chapter 64. My life was as full as I could ever have hoped for with Erin and my children. Evan and I shared a growing musical bond in addition to our bond as father and son. Colin, my little dynamo, was a perfect blend of rambunctiousness and cuddling who wrestled me with laughter and a determination to win. Sarah had grown disarmingly beautiful, a little drama queen who danced, sang, and had her mother's daring and spunk. What more could I have wanted or needed? Erin was very vocal about wanting to have one more child. I couldn't imagine having yet another, but judging by how quickly she was again pregnant, God had other ideas. And once our daughter Emily Grace arrived, I couldn't imagine life without her. She's clearly part of a plan I didn't understand. Although she strongly resembles me, she's blessed to be another stunner like her sister. Stubborn, secure, and always laughing, Emmy is my angel. My 4 children have made me wealthy beyond anything I ever could have imagined, and it's a gift to know that. As I got older, my mother said on many occasions that I should call any time and at any hour if I needed to talk. I always found comfort in that, and when I felt the need, I did call her without hesitation. My parents' desire to be there for me as an adult was unfortunately often sabotaged for all of us by a disconnect in their own lives decades past, but I never doubted their love for me. How much could I really have hoped for when their own experiences from a young age left them unable to help themselves or each other? My mom and dad were good people who, over the course of their lives, tried to make their way as best they could with the cards they had been dealt. Frustrating and unsuccessful as many attempts were, they, like me, never stopped trying, and that is what I keep with me. When KISS decided to start making another album, Monster, in 2011, the ground rules were the same as for Sonic Boom. Gene said in a few interviews that he didn't have the time to do the production work because of all the other things he had going on, which I, of course, found undermining and designed to imply that I was producing by default. The truth is, neither of those albums would have been made if I hadn't produced them. I wasn't aiming to be a dictator, just demanding to be a director. We went into the studio with a sense of pride, not with a sense of obligation. We wanted to challenge ourselves as well as build on what had come before. The long journey through different players, different lineups, different tours and albums had gotten us to the real KISS. This is the band. The 4 of us had a ball making the record. We collaborated as a band. A song like Wall of Sound began as an idea Gene brought to the table. Then Tommy found the riff and I added the lyrics. Eric said, let's make a song with a bit of the feel of the MC5, and came up with a drum part that became the foundation of Back to the Stone Age. The album came together from all of us working together, plain and simple. Monster isn't just classic Kiss, it's classic rock. It reminds me of why I love rock and roll and what made the bands that inspired me so great. Between Eric's authority, Tommy's fire, and Gene's undeniable ferocity, both in his bass playing and his vocals, Monster has a rare vitality. It sounds like the work of a new band. In fact, the album probably would have had a bigger commercial impact if it had been released by an unknown band. I get it. There's no getting around the fact that nothing Kiss does in the future will have the impact of the things we did in the past. Those things took place in a different era. The world was different. The music business was different. The monolithic nature of pop culture was different. In addition, of course, the magnitude of something gets enhanced by the simple passage of time. As good as it is, Hell or Hallelujah can never be Love Gun. The classic songs have already been the soundtrack to people's lives for 40 years in some cases. There's no way to compete with that. None of the newer material has time on its side. But then again, when we play Lick It Up, it goes over gangbusters. What was once considered one of our new songs has long since acquired classic status to people who came to the party a little later. The song Circus is now a show opener and goes over better now than when it came out. Time is the ultimate judge. As we hit the road to celebrate Monster, one of my favorite parts of the tour quickly became the meet and greet before each show when we played an unplugged show without makeup in the afternoon for a small group of fans who had bought special VIP packages. We couldn't possibly have done the meet and greets with Ace and Peter. For one thing, they wouldn't have shown up. For another, they didn't know enough songs to do what's most fun about these gatherings, letting the fans make requests and then hashing out the songs on the spot, sometimes after not having played them for decades. It's a thrill to see the reaction of the fans, and we have a blast jamming there with them as if we're all in a living room. The band is so comfortable now and capable. Admittedly, the VIP packages aren't cheap, but people actually thank us after the meet and greets. That, to me, is the ultimate testament to what we're doing. If someone pays you and then thanks you, you've done a good job. The current lineup of Kiss has built a broad sense of community that wouldn't have been possible when we were burdened by all the inner turmoil of the old lineup. Doctors come up to me at the shows and say, "You got me through med school." Former convicts say, "You got me through prison." People tell me Kiss helped them deal with the deaths of loved ones or battles with cancer. At a concert in St. Louis in 2012, I had arranged complimentary meet and greet tickets for a young man incapacitated by ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease. He couldn't move or speak, but I thought I detected the hint of a smile in his eyes when we took photos with him. Also in the VIP tent that afternoon was a married couple who were buying an electric guitar I would play later that night on stage. Following our unplugged set, I talked to the man and woman for a while and determined how they wanted their guitar inscribed. After the wheelchair-bound man with ALS left the tent, the husband of the couple turned to me and said, "We bought a second guitar for that young man." That stopped me in my tracks. The guitars I sell are intended for collectors and cost thousands of dollars. This couple didn't know the man in the wheelchair. They didn't know what his ailment was or anything else about him. They had simply seen him across the room. I told them I was moved by their gesture. "We're very lucky people," explained the husband. "We like to pay it forward." Their reward was the act of giving. Mine was to reimburse them the cost of the guitar. That same year, I met a woman in San Antonio who came to the show to celebrate her cancer being in remission for a year. Another night, coming off stage in Las Vegas, a police officer came up to me with a huge smile on his face. "Destroyer was my first album," he said. "The show was amazing. Oh my God, I can die now." "Please don't," I said. And then we hugged. I know I'm not Florence Nightingale, and obviously Kiss never was and still isn't a philanthropic movement or a humanitarian effort. We're four guys who play instruments. We're a rock band. And yet to realize our band can be an inspiration and raise awareness and contribute significant sums to worthy causes like the Wounded Warrior Project and various cancer charities is both humbling and deeply rewarding. Early in Kiss's career, I thought it was cool to see people at the shows having fun. Now I see the part I play in making them happy and find that very fulfilling. The time and consideration I can give to people who, for instance, are returning from military service or have gone through tough times of one kind or another, means so much to me now. It was nice when I was young, but it didn't go to the core of my being the way it does now. The more opportunity I have to treat people the way I wished I myself had been treated, the better I feel. It's also amazing how little it takes to have a huge effect on someone's life. It's tempting to say it would be sinful not to take advantage of such opportunities, but then again, there's a selfish element to it. I feel that I gain as much as the other person. I've taken some big leaps in my life, and the biggest ones have been in the past 15 years. Learning the value of kindness was a gift that came to me late, but it changed the game. Doing for others is now the most satisfying thing in my life, the gift I never knew. It's fulfilling in a way I could never have imagined when I was young. Back then, I thought I knew everything. It's amazing some of the things I thought I knew. That was sheer audacity. Being judgmental was a defense mechanism and a way to avoid looking at myself. It was rooted in fear and self-doubt. I didn't like myself. I'm Jewish and I believe in God, but I don't picture God as an old man with a beard and a robe sitting in heaven judging us. The thing I love about Judaism is that it's not about being good because of the consequences of being bad. It's about being good because it's the way we are supposed to be. Being good is its own reward. I'll buy that. When Evan was born, I read a book on interfaith marriages that said the problem in such families can be that children often don't feel fully part of one religion or the other because of tensions between the parents. When children fear they might be angering or betraying a parent, they're paralyzed. In our family, our kids aren't 50% Catholic and 50% Jewish. They're 100% both. I grew up around people who had numbers tattooed on their arms from being in concentration camps, and I feel a responsibility to them and to the 6 million others who were killed to keep their stories alive and make sure my kids know the history of Jews and Judaism. But ultimately, I'll let my children come to their own conclusions as far as what they want to participate in and believe, and I'll know they are deep, wonderful people regardless of their choices. I gave a speech at a high school graduation ceremony in June 2012 that emphasized the need to show compassion. I talked about my ear deformity and deafness and the way I shut myself off from others as a result. And then I came to the most important part. The part about realizing how I can help myself by helping others, how I can free myself from harsh judgment by not judging others. When someone asked for a handout, I said, it's easy to look down on that person or to say, get a job. America is a land of opportunity, yes, but not everyone gets the same chances. You have no idea what got that person into his or her situation. You don't necessarily solve anything by helping the person, but if you provide even a moment's respite from difficulties and pain, it's worthwhile. Plus, you'll feel good about it. That lost soul is one of God's children, and by being compassionate and kind, you open yourself up to a feeling of peace and contentment. Who am I to look down my nose at somebody? Judging others and being quick to criticize just pollutes your life. Learning how to open your hand is the best thing you can possibly learn. That lesson has been brought into our home as well. From a very early age, Evan's birthday parties were no-gift parties. What kid needs 30 gifts? How about learning what it means to give to others instead? Each year for his birthday, he picked a charity, and we collected money at his party to donate to his chosen cause. I would kill to be able to play guitar the way Evan can now, but I'm far more proud of the hard-working and compassionate human being he has grown up to be. As Erin and I have nurtured our 3 younger children, we've tried to make them aware of their part in the world too, and the responsibilities that come with it. To paraphrase Bob Dylan, you may know what you want, but not what you need. We all run around wanting certain things, but when you reach a point where you can distinguish between the things you thought you wanted and the things you actually need, that is an epiphany. In my case, it may have been necessary to get what I wanted in order to learn what I needed. Achieving all those things that I thought would make me happy, fame, wealth, desirability, confronted me at each milestone with the fact that what I had chased wasn't the solution. In each case, I may still not have known what I needed, but I could scratch another potential solution off the list. Not fame, not wealth, not desirability. I had to go through it all to find the truth. Fortunately, just because something turns out ultimately not to be the right road doesn't mean it ain't fun driving on it. I'm a firm believer that everything in my life has led me to where I am today. I have few, if any, regrets. After all, if I'd done things differently, perhaps I wouldn't have made it here at all. There were times when it was tough to get through the day, but even on those days I knew that if I fought my way through, there was something better ahead. When faced with misfortune, you can either sit in the shit or you can clean yourself off and move forward. In my case, I always chose to move forward. I didn't know how hard it would be to find my way, but I knew I wouldn't stop until I had. It was just a question of work. My quest to perfect myself, or whatever you want to call it, ended up teaching me the impossibility of that goal. It's not about being perfect, being normal, or seeking approval. It's about being forgiving of imperfection, being generous to all sorts of people, and giving approval. That, too, takes work. I'm not what I call a passive optimist. I don't believe everything will work out if I wish for it hard enough. I'm a realistic optimist. I know that as long as I'm realistic about my capabilities, I can make things work out, or at the very least, I can try to steer things in the right direction. On the one hand, no matter how hard anyone pictures himself or herself, say, flying, it's not going to happen. You can do something 10,000 times and still be bad at it if you have no aptitude for it. As far as I'm concerned, if you pursue something that's out of your reach, then you're a fool. Time is irreplaceable, and you are the only person who will bear the brunt of your misjudgments. On the other hand, realistic goals can be achieved through hard work. There's nothing wrong with limitations. If anything, you get farther when you realize what your limitations truly are. It's just that many limitations are either self-imposed or based on what other people believe them to be. You need to determine your own limitations and then work toward their outer limits. Evan called me from his dorm room during his first semester at college in the fall of 2012. He just had breakfast with Jimmy Page. Yes, that Jimmy Page. I thought back to being Evan's age. I'd been a lost teen with a dream and a commitment to making it come true, and Led Zeppelin was my biggest influence. Now Jimmy had one of my paintings hanging in his country home, and my son, the same age I was when, as a total outsider, I stared in awe at Zeppelin, hangs out with him. Funny how things can come full circle. Your life and destiny are determined to a large extent by your participation in the outcome. Think big, work hard. Dad? I snapped back from my reverie. Telling me about his breakfast with a legend wasn't why Evan had called me. The real reason he called was because he wanted to cook Brussels sprouts in his dorm room. Dad's Brussels sprouts, the way I made them at home. He needed the recipe. How cool. I explained how to pan-fry them and told him how much balsamic vinegar, dried cherries, and prosciutto I used. And don't forget to top them with some grated Parmesan cheese and a little lemon zest. My younger children already like to help me cook. Lately, they've become interested in gardening. We decided to plant a family vegetable garden. Erin and I went to a nursery and bought heirloom seeds, and together with the kids planted tomatoes, sugar snap peas, strawberries, carrots, and broccoli. I watched in astonishment as these things that looked like lint balls eventually started to send up green shoots as the kids watered them day after day. As the plants started to grow, I found I too had a desire to nurture them so they would grow up big and strong. It was something I could never have imagined myself feeling. One afternoon, Colin, who was in elementary school, told me, "I have some important work to do." Then he scurried out the back door. After a few minutes, I went out and checked on him. What could he be doing that was so important to him? He was kneeling in our vegetable patch, pulling weeds. Soon enough, we had a bumper crop of tomatoes, and the kids and I made huge vats of tomato sauce. We froze some, but we used a lot in lasagna and on pizzas we learned to bake together. I found a recipe for a thin crust dough. We all sat around mixing and rolling, and then we topped our pizzas with our homegrown tomato sauce and grilled them in a wood-burning stone pizza oven we had built in the backyard. There's something wonderful and almost therapeutic about making your own food from seed to table. If you told me 15 years ago that I would have photos on my phone of the lasagna I made with my kids, I would have called you crazy. But the photos are there. We have a family-friendly, food-friendly, wine-friendly household. We sit and eat together as a family, and I look forward to it every day. Sometimes I'm reminded of a sunny afternoon in the 1980s when I watched from the pool at the Sunset Marquee as the band Mike and the Mechanics checked in with their kids and strollers and nannies. I remember shaking my head, thinking it was the most uncool thing I had ever seen. These days there's nothing I consider cooler than being on our jet with the kids running up and down the aisle, or standing on stage in front of 100,000 people at the Download Festival while my kids watch and wave from the side of the stage, or walking backstage and seeing Emily, Sarah, and Colin in their pajamas. It's amazing. And to have it at my age is even more amazing. Perhaps it's unusual to be 62 years old and have a 2-year-old. Certainly, I feel blessed. People equate getting old with shutting down, with the joy seeping out of your life. But me, I'm in love with my wife. I love my kids. There's a part of my life that's over, but what's taken its place is so much more fulfilling. Sure, every once in a while I look at a hot young woman and think for a fleeting moment about what I will never again have. But when I think of what I have instead, it's no contest. That's also why I finally decided to write this book. Because despite the odds, I managed to go from a very unhappy place to a peaceful, harmonious place. If I found a path, no matter how long and arduous, to happiness and satisfaction, I firmly believe others can too. It may not be an easy road, but sticking to that road and pushing forward is the most worthwhile thing you'll ever do. We tend to compromise through life and lower the bar. We settle for relationships or jobs because we're not sure that we can do better or that we even deserve better. But we can do better, and we do deserve it. Life is not about surrendering. Chapter 65. Because of the makeup, Kiss today looks pretty much the same as we did 40 years ago. But the longer I keep at this, the more I realize that I'm not invincible. It's an ever more daunting task to get up there and sing and play guitar and dance and do it in a way that appears effortless. Nobody wants to see somebody killing himself on stage. I enjoy every minute of performing, but it has always been physically grueling, and it certainly is more so now. When I was younger, people asked me, "Doesn't it hurt when you jump up in the air and land on your knees like that?" "No," I said. Well, I wish I had their phone numbers, because all those years of doing jumps without pain have left me with a reminder. My knees hurt now. I don't know whether people in the audience can fathom just how difficult it is, or the extent to which they themselves make it possible. I could never jump around like that at a rehearsal. I depend on those people. I depend on the rush of adrenaline I get from them. Every night I find myself up there with a huge smile on my face, laughing, having a great time. It's a gift, and it's terrific that I love it and have fun doing it, and it's doubly terrific to look out into the audience and see other people loving it too. I never understand bands who say they're sick of playing their hit songs. I'm thrilled to play our big songs. I'm proud of those songs. And the people at our shows deserve to hear the music the way they love it. God knows how many times I've played Firehouse over the course of the past 40 years, but I still love it. When Gene, Tommy, and I rock back and forth to Deuce, it's the ultimate middle finger to the people who don't like us and the ultimate salute to those who do. Each night is the only night that counts to the people at that show. They weren't at the show the night before, and they won't be at the one tomorrow. I won't let them down. Most rock and roll is so age-specific or demographic-specific. Your favorite band can't be your older brother's favorite band, and God forbid it be your parents' favorite band. A Kiss show is different. It's a gathering of a large, long-lasting society that transcends any demographics. There's nothing better than seeing people holding up their children during a show. People want to share this cult of millions with their kids. It means that much to them. Those people are happy. They're getting a break from whatever else is going on in their lives. Even as citizens of the world with a sense of morality and purpose, everyone is entitled to a day off. All the problems of the world will still be there tomorrow. What Kiss does is timeless. We sing about self-empowerment, celebrating life, believing in yourself, and sex. It ain't a crime to be good to yourself. Is there anything more truthful than that? We're all here one time, and why should anyone but you get to decide who you love and how you spend your time? We sing about the joys of being alive. On the Sonic Boom Tour, Gene, Tommy, and I would get into a caged-in platform behind Eric's drums before the first song started. As we played the first song, the platform would go up and over the drums and eventually put us down at the front of the stage. It was a spectacular effect. I can't tell you how many times as we came over the top and I first saw the audience, I got choked up and teary-eyed. I looked out over the crowd and was amazed. What a blessing. My God. Had somebody told me Kiss was going to last 40 years with no end in sight, that I would be wearing the same outfit and not getting laughed off the stage, that on the contrary, we'd be selling out arenas and stadiums, I would never have believed it. I think the longer we've survived, the more potent we've become. There's something inspiring about longevity. There's something inspiring about going against the odds and thriving. Perhaps the best way to win is not to play the game. 20 or 30 years ago, I couldn't imagine the world without me, much less the band. But at some point, you can't ignore the reality of your own mortality. I won't be physically capable of performing in Kiss forever. Something I've come to understand, though, is that I'm not immortal. The band is. Nowadays, I don't confuse my role in the world or the band. I realize that Kiss could and should go on without me. Kiss isn't like other bands. We've never subscribed to the limitations other bands impose on themselves. People come to see the characters we created and what those characters represent. It's not me they're coming to see, but what I embody. There was a time when people said nobody in this band could be replaced. It had to be the four of us. Well, they're already 50% wrong. And they're going to find out at some point that they're 75% wrong and then 100% wrong. I'm objective enough about myself to realize that no matter how good I am, and I think I'm damn good, there's somebody else out there who can do something equally valid. I think that being replaced would be a huge compliment, not a detriment. It's part of what I hope we've built, an ideal that goes far beyond me. Causes go on, political parties go on without their founders. I think someone could come along who would be capable of carrying the flag just as well, if not better, someone who can build on the foundation. I look forward to the day that I'm replaced in Kiss, not because I want to leave, but because it will prove I'm right. Kiss is bigger than any of its members. I've always said that I'm not just a member of Kiss, I'm a member of the Kiss Army. I look forward to watching the band I love continue to rock and roll all night, long after my body is too shot to make it to the party every day. This is Paul Stanley. Face the Music, A Life Exposed was directed by Fred Sanders and recorded at the media staff in Los Angeles. The engineer was John Kovarik. It was produced by Karen Jakonski. Post-production by Common Mode, Paul Fowley, Technical Director. Text copyright 2014 by Paul Stanley. Production copyright 2014 by HarperCollins Publishers. All rights reserved. Thank you for listening.